everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed your first session. So like Rachel had mentioned, this is Building Mathematical Discourse. I'm Allison Hamlet. I'm an instructional leadership coach in Brockton Public Schools, which is a large urban district in southeastern Massachusetts.
Be frozen. All right, so I think Allison is frozen for a moment. I'm Maria Nemi, and I work in Brockton Public Schools. I was a middle school math teacher for 8 years, and then worked as a STEM coach in one of our ELT schools, and now work as the technology specialist trying to integrate our technology platforms into the curriculum.
All right, so we have 3 sections of our presentation today. So we're going to talk about facilitating accountable discussions and instructional strategies in order to do that, facilitating one-on-one with students with ST Math and small groups, and then how we can incorporate puzzle talks in order to build mathematical discourse. So the first part, we want to just hear from you. So what are you seeing as either teachers in the classroom or district leaders as how ST Math is currently being used in your buildings or in your district? What do you see and what do you notice? So Maria is going to put a Jamboard into the chat. If you don't mind just taking about 30 seconds to reflect on what you are currently seeing in your district. So if you're unfamiliar with Jamboard, you'll click on the little post-it on the side, and then a sticky note will pop up, and you're able to share what you are currently seeing. So we're seeing that some of you are seeing it as a center rotation, or you're seeing it as an independent activity. You're also seeing it as whole group ST Math time, puzzle trackers, setting goals, which are all great things to be seeing. Feel free to continue adding to that. If you're unable to put anything on the Jamboard, feel free to put your input into the chat. So now we're going to talk about why you think mathematical discourse is so important. So if you go to the next slide on the Jamboard, so to slide 2, there's kind of a twofold question. So why is mathematical discourse so important? And what are teachers in your school or your district doing to promote discourse? So just looking through some of the responses, we're seeing a lot of turning and talking, using sentence frames, which is great. We're going to talk a lot about that. We're also seeing that it helps students share their ideas and learn from their peers, helping students that might have a misconception or might not be understanding the content. They're able to really gauge understanding from what others are sharing. So those are great ideas, and we're going to build on everything that you're already starting to think about in terms of mathematical discourse. So these are some of the reasons why we think mathematical discourse and accountable talk, especially with ST Math, is so important. So as you know, many of our schools and many of our districts have an ever-growing population of English learners in our classroom. And it's really important that with these diverse learners come the diverse language needs that they have. So we need to make sure that we're building in opportunities for them to not only engage with reading and writing, which are two domains of language, but also the listening and speaking domains of language, and how that's always important. And math discourse really allows them to make their thinking visual and extend their thinking, help their thinking grow, and having them talk it out, reason their ideas, work collaboratively with their peers, or even help other students grow their own thinking or critique their own thinking in some way and think about reasoning from a different point of view. And it also really helps to strengthen their communication skills. And with all of these, we need to give them the opportunities. Giving students the opportunities to engage in discourse around math is crucial. So again, I spoke about how we have an ever-growing population of English learners in our classroom, and we really have the opportunity in terms of math discourse, especially around ST Math, of building different features of academic language. So when you think about linguistic complexity, we can really differentiate among grade levels. So what you might be using in terms of discourse in a K1-2 classroom might look a little bit different from a 3-4-5 classroom. Or even if you're thinking about proficiency levels of English learners, it might look different with a sentence stem for a level 1 or a level 2 than it might be with a level 4 or 5 in terms of WIDA proficiency. You can also use different language forms and conventions when you're talking about discourse, having them using sentence varieties if you're providing them with sentence frames, or challenge their thinking to might phrase it in a little bit of a different way. You can also really build in opportunities for them to be able to use content-specific vocab. So assuring that they're using words like factor and multiple and greater than, less than. But we can also then build in opportunities for them to have not only social language, which they're building, but also academic language. So we're changing the content. We're allowing them to stretch beyond the typical ESL instruction that might happen in an ELA block. And now we're stretching it into a math block where we're really showing students that language can be applied across all content areas. So it'll be really important for the language of math to have them be using these specific words, and that we're going through and really teaching the vocab. What do they mean when they're using the word quotient? What do they mean when they're using the word least common multiple? But we can also teach words through multiple meaning words. You're talking about the root of a number. Well, what could that also mean? So we're really helping break down the language barrier for students through ST Math, and they can start using different operations, identifying Gigi is multiplying, and I know this because Gigi's monster pie machine ate the number because it is greater than this. So we're starting to use those content specific words.
All right, so the next part of the presentation, we're really going to look at some different strategies that you might be already using in your schools that are really going to promote that mathematical discourse, and how we're going to connect it to ST Math. So first thing you want to do as either a coach, a district leader, or as a teacher is really brainstorm the ways that you incorporate best practices, your instructional routines, your teacher moves into ST Math. You can have them aligned to your district initiatives or school-based initiatives or focus areas, but things you really want to consider are what is the professional development teachers have had around these different pedagogy skills or instructional strategies. In order to build capacity in your buildings, you want to make sure that you're asking teachers to do something that they're familiar with and have had trainings on, and possibly ongoing trainings. So for instance, if your school is focused on sentence stems, or if they're focused on, let's say, like a math workshop model, or accountable talks, or your puzzle talks, if you've had PDs on that in your buildings, then those would be the strategies that I would then suggest teachers start to incorporate when they use ST Math. So just looking at the Jamboard, we saw lots of great things about discourse, and we do those in almost all of our activities in all content areas. But then oftentimes when we start to use ST Math, we do see it as this independent activity where it's a rotation, kids put on the headphones, they're working on ST Math. They might have some paper out to show their thinking, but very not often do I see that teachers are using those strategies that they use for discourse in their math block with ST Math. So really, I think when we do it this way, we're going to build that buy-in from teachers and schools, because it's not one more thing you're asking them to do. You're asking them to transfer those skills that they already have and they're familiar with, the kids are familiar with, into the ST Math block. So we just have some common strategies. I'm going to show you ideas of how you can incorporate either sentence stems, your number talk, cooperative learning, talk moves, the I notice, I wonder, I do, we do, you do, and then like the depth of knowledge for differentiation. So real brief overview in case someone isn't familiar with this strategy. Your I do, we do, you do, right? The teacher models a specific strategy that you want students to do. It's really like, you know, teacher directed, direct instruction. Then we move to that we do, which is more of guided practice or facilitated learning, where the kids are working together with the teacher to work on the similar type of problem. And then the you do, that independent practice piece. So we've modeled it for the kids with the direct instruction. We then gave them some guided practice, facilitated, and then they're moving on to that independent practice. So really, to promote math discourse, we have teachers that often use the flip of this. So instead of starting with the I do, try to start with the you do. So if this is a strategy teachers are familiar with, you could just switch it up real quick, and it really gives kids lots of opportunities to share ideas, practice your perseverance, to problem solve, to take risks. Because oftentimes when we model a strategy for students, when we then have that guided practice or independent practice, the kids are doing exactly what we did, right? It's hard to really get kids to talk about the math when you've already given them all the words and language to do it. Like, how can they think critically? How can they reason and problem solve? And they have a better opportunity of doing that if you start with the you do and then move to the I do. So we can kind of skip through this, but it's basically the flop, right? We're going to start with the teacher assigns a problem to the students work on it, they try to make sense, find that entry point. There's going to be multiple strategies kids are going to choose because you just didn't model for them one way to solve that problem, which is usually where the kids will then go. They'll use that same strategy. So if you allow them first to start on their own, you'll get multiple strategies, which will just be a richer math discussion that you can make connections to. Then move to the we do, and then that direct instruction, the I do, where instead of modeling for students, I'm going to be making sure that I have that direct instruction to make connections to all of their shared ideas and strategies. So just an idea of how it might look with ST Math. So for instance, a teacher might assign a puzzle to the entire class. So you want to make sure you select a puzzle that with like a learning outcome in mind and what objective you want the students to be able to accomplish. So you could do this at the start of a new unit where kids are unfamiliar and they really are going to have to persevere and use some of their prior knowledge to try to solve that problem. Or you could do it at the end of a unit, in the middle of a unit, to kind of see like they've already been exposed to a bunch of different strategies on this topic or objective. So like which strategy are kids going to then try to use? When you plan for this type of activity, I would definitely keep in mind, like, if I assign this puzzle, how might students interpret the problem? What strategies might they use? What skills might they understand? And what common mistakes or errors might I see with this particular puzzle or concept?
And this problem solving process is really important too, that you can find right on the ST Math central page. So especially in the upper grades where you can really teach this process. What are they going to do first when they get a puzzle? Okay, well, they're going to notice and wonder, and then they're going to predict what might Gigi be doing. And this really helps, especially in 4th and 5th grade, when you get to some of the higher level puzzles. It really helps them problem solve and get to the end goal, like Maria had mentioned.
All right, thank you, Allison. It's an excellent point, and we are going to get more to the problem solving process through this task. But so in the you do part, we have teachers. So like you assign the puzzle, right? You planned for that puzzle. You have an idea of like the learning outcome. And as they're doing the puzzle, you're circulating the room and you're really trying to observe and interact with the students. So at this point, you're offering no help to students. It's the opportunity for productive struggle. Like Allison said, that problem solving process, if you really have a kid that's stuck and they need that entry point, a few different things you could do. You could use the problem solving process as a list of guiding questions because they're generic. Oftentimes with ST Math, I find that sometimes I'll walk over to a puzzle and I'm not sure what the puzzle's asking us to do. And it can be intimidating, and it's hard sometimes to ask questions to students when you're not sure what the puzzle, like what the intention of the puzzle is or how to solve it yourself. So if you have this kind of toolkit, this problem solving process, you can ask those leading questions like Allison said. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What do you see on the screen? What happens when you click this? What tool do you notice Gigi is using in this puzzle? So that way kids, what have you tried, right? So kids can start to have that entry point, but you're not giving them any information about the content. So you would monitor students as they start to problem solve, and you're looking for what strategies are they using? Were things expected or unexpected? What tools maybe did they select to help them solve that problem? What things are they recording on their paper? Really listen and pay attention to that mathematical thinking, right? Ask the students questions and how are they justifying their solution and strategy. So just quick implementation tips. ST Math is fabulous and actually has a lot of built-in tools that help you with kids that are stuck and how to get them unstuck. So if a kid really is stuck on this piece because maybe it is a brand new concept to them and they're not sure what to do, if you double click anywhere in the blue sky when students are on ST Math, like anywhere on the screen, it'll highlight or flash different things on the screen. If we have time, we can show you that. But it allows, it's an entry point, right? Like what things can you manipulate? What can you touch? So you could prompt kids to do that, prompt them to get a math tool or some of the manipulatives they use in class. And you could also always return to one of those previous levels that maybe the students have completed that are connected. So we can be like, how did this puzzle build on another? So typically if I assign one of these puzzles, I would make sure I chose one that was a little further into like the games, I guess, like you have a game and then you have the puzzles and objectives inside it. So I would choose one that's kind of in the middle on one objective. That way you could go back if you needed to, so kids could start at an easier entry level and then build on their knowledge. All right, so that we do piece. So now we've switched from the kids have tried to do this, and you could group the kids too, even in the you do, so that they can start to talk with each other to encourage that mathematical discourse, or it could be individual. As we do, I would display the puzzle on the board, and then I'd start that class discussion. So I would, you could either, so you got to select kids to share those strategies. So you could either tell the kids ahead of time who you're going to have share their strategies. That way they could be organized and have an idea of what they're going to say with that math vocab, right? You'd prompt them and encourage them to do all of that. If you wanted to have it be more just kind of like you're going to choose anyone who wants to participate, then you could do this as almost like a puzzle talk and lead it using that problem solving process, asking those prompting questions as you work through the puzzle and taking different student responses. I really like to select students when I choose to do this strategy ahead of time, because then I'm able to kind of have an idea of how I'm going to make these connections. Are the strategies different? How are they alike? And also, if I have kids that have wrong answers and I know it might be a common misconception, I'm still going to ask them to share. I want them to share it. I'm going to model out exactly what they do. So everything they do, I'll model out on the puzzle. And I usually will choose a student maybe or a group that has an incorrect response or solution, because then we can learn from that mistake and then we can move to an answer that is correct. So like, why didn't this work? What were we thinking? And then we can move to one that's that is correct. So I really do think the sequence and order with the strategy matters, because the goal is to make those big connections between the content, what you're doing in class, and their prior knowledge. Again, so make those connections to those strategies. So that's why I would be selective about the sequence in the order I choose kids to volunteer. How are the ideas similar? How are they different? How does one idea build or extend on another idea? It just gives a lot of opportunity for that math discourse and really get kids talking about the math. And we all know that like when you talk and teach the math, you're more likely to remember it, understand it. So it's really your best form of learning. All right, tips for doing this. So again, like you could use the learning cycle, which I think ST Math is kind of shifting away from. So really the problem solving cycle or process you could use to lead that puzzle talk if you need help to kind of do that we do part when you're selecting students. They have that green go button now on ST Math. And I really love this because before I click that button, I'll always say to kids when I'm either leading a puzzle talk or facilitating this kind of discussion, like, what do you predict is going to happen? So before I click that, they tell me what to do. Before we click it, what do you predict is going to happen? And that really gives the kids an opportunity to kind of think about, like, what was my strategy? What was the outcome I was looking for? What's going to happen on the screen? And then truly get them to think and reason before they just go ahead and click an answer. So I try to reinforce that habit with kids. The other really great tool that ST Math has on, besides just the being able to highlight, you have the green go button now, which I really think helps with that discourse piece, because I can click and we're pausing, right? Do the math, pause before I click go. But you also have an auto pause in the kids menu option, where they can, it like basically allows you to do like a rewind option on your screen. So the animation that happens after you click that green button, that's all the math, right? Like that's the big concept that's so important. And oftentimes kids miss it. Either goes too fast or they miss the tool, or if their answer was wrong, why was it wrong? So I like to turn the auto pause on. It's not a feature that's just set on for students. That way they have to click play and they can easily rewind. That way they can see what's happening and really focus on the math, because it's immediate feedback for the kids. And that's, I think, is the huge piece of ST Math that's so valuable to us. So encourage kids to do that. If we have time again, we'll show you how to do that for kids. I do have a few videos there. I'll throw them in the chat on how to do that for students. So again, just some tips when you're doing these kind of strategies that ST Math's already built in to make your life really easy. All right, so then the I do piece, right? We bring them all together. I'm going to model that problem solving cycle like Allison said, and every time I go through it, I always go through every single question the same way, and I ask it over and over and over again, because I want it to become internal for the kids. They need to be asking themselves those questions when they are working independently, when you sometimes do ST Math. So again, if those are going to lead to better learning outcomes for the kids, better understanding of the math. And here's where I'm going to provide that explicit instruction to reinforce the concepts, the ideas, and the strategies that align with my learning objective that I wanted. So as a district leader or coach, I would say, like, one of the things you probably need to do is make sure your teachers know how to find different objectives and different concepts throughout the journey that they can assign to students. That way you can help them get there, because oftentimes they just have the kids do the individual journey. Oh, and the annotation tool is really great too, to highlight those math features, but that's the very last tool you can pull up. All right, so briefly, because I know you guys know this kind of stuff, your sentence stems. People talked about it on the Jamboard. It's very common. New teachers, old teachers, everybody can use this strategy. It's good for kids, whether you use sentence stems or sentence starters. You can differentiate them very easily. Give them to kids when they're doing ST Math. Set a timer, right? So maybe they have like a stack of the sentence stems in a group, or they turn and talk to a partner. Set a timer for 5 minutes. If you are doing a more rotation station and it's a little more independent, incorporate discourse by setting a timer. When it goes off, pick up a sentence stem and turn and talk to your partner about whatever puzzle you're working on. So they could be at all different levels and all different puzzles, and they could still engage with each other and talk about the puzzle, right? And just have it be part of the routine, whatever works for you and your students. Really, for differentiation, that Webb's depth of knowledge, or if you use Bloom's taxonomy, so you can differentiate by level. You can know, if you know your students, then you can make sure they have those sentence stems in front of them that are better equipped for their learning at the moment, right? Like, where are they at? You got to meet the kids where they're at and then start to push them ahead. It might be because it's a new concept we start at the first level, or because maybe it's a younger group of students. So here it's, again, just the Bloom's text or Webb's depth of knowledge, but with either sentence stems or sentence starters. And same thing. So like, if you're familiar with the levels, right? Like, it starts off with like your recall, and then like more of your application. And then 3 and 4 really is your higher level thinking skills. So it's your strategic thinking and extending your critical thinking. So how is this related to this? How is this puzzle related to this math concept, right? How would you test the strategy Gigi used? You can make it more ST Math friendly or just keep them very generic. You can find these anywhere. I'm sure your school has them. You might already have them in cards or on rings for students. You use them in different activities, bring them into ST Math.
So now we're going to talk about facilitation one-on-one with students and in small groups. So when we're putting students in small groups or facilitating one-on-one, we're creating all of these opportunities for them to talk about math. So they'll be able to make more mathematical connections to whether you picked a puzzle that you assigned to them or if it's just along their journey. And it's a cooperative opportunity for students to share and apply their thinking, either one-on-one with a teacher or another person that's in the room, but also with their peers. So there's a couple different ways that you can choose and support your teachers in really creating small groups. So this is just a sample data set. And if I'm looking at this dashboard, I might choose to group students in a couple of different ways. I might notice that there are 3 or 2 students that are both on select elephants. They might be on different levels, but that's okay. And they would be able to support each other along the way. And you really have to build in this accountability around partner and small group instruction, like some of you had mentioned on the Jamboard, around how do I be a good partner? How do I teach as opposed to giving the answer to my friend? So I might pair Alex and Melissa together because they can support each other because they're on the same content or they're on the same objective. Whereas I might also pair up Alex, Gemma, and Aiden because they're all on puzzles that have to do with multiplication. They might not necessarily be the same objective, but they all are working on the same concept or similar concept. Some are working with decimals, some are working on a number line, and some are working on the algorithm, but they're all working on multiplication. And then when you're talking about working one-on-one with a student, you're noticing you all have access to these dashboards, whether you're at the classroom level or the district level. But wow, I'm really noticing that these children have really high numbers of tries. So I'm going to work one-on-one in facilitation, or I might pull a couple of them together. So I might actually facilitate 1-on-2 with Alex and Melissa because they're on the same objective, but also because they have a high number of tries. So that's a couple of different ways that you can support teachers and really creating those small groups. Now, if you were trying to lead a PD for your teachers or for your leaders within your school around how to create these small groups, you might put up a sample data set just like I have and have them notice and brainstorm, whether it be on a Jamboard or on a poster, different ways that they could group them and the reasons behind that. Now, how do we create accountability for students when they have this? So you're going to have those turn and talk routines like you had mentioned on the Jamboards. You can also create accountable talk rubrics where they're really recognizing not only themselves, but also recognizing their peers and how to draw out more information or more thinking from their peers. And that's something that you can really build over time as these structures are put into place, where at first they're going to rate themselves on the rubric of where they fell with their small group time or their partner time. But then eventually they might turn to, I'm going to rate my group and I'm going to see kind of where we're all at so they can all be reflective of their own learning. So now we're going to transition into puzzle talks just to get a gauge. Can you put into the chat either a 1, 2, or 3, kind of where your experience lays with puzzle talks? So 1, no clue, but I'm certainly interested. 2, kind of, sort of, but definitely looking to grow your practice. And 3, I'm an expert and I could model this in a classroom.
And Allison, while folks are filling that in, I had a question if you were going to plan to share the slide deck out after the session?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so I'm seeing a lot of 1s and 2s, a couple of 3s in there. Great, so I think that this section will be really beneficial to many of you. So why puzzle talks? So puzzle talks are a great way to help kind of whole group wise, build mathematical discourse and conversation into the classroom. So they build the opportunity to build number sense or justify your own thinking or your own communication, persevere in problem solving as well, learn from each other's mistakes. It's okay to raise your hand and not have the right answer, but then we're going to help that student along the way because we've built this culture of community and a culture of discourse within the classroom. We can also think about different strategies. A lot of times on ST Math, there might be more than one way to solve a problem. And all of those different ways and strategies need to be justified and also acknowledge that that's okay. We can also investigate and apply mathematical connections between ST Math and what you're teaching in your regular content. And you can actually use ST Math to teach the content. It also helps build a variety of strategies to problem solve, and it also helps students make decisions for more efficient strategies along the way. They might make connections they might not necessarily have made without ST Math and that visual spatial piece. So where do puzzle talks fit in? They fit in anywhere. This is not just one more thing that teachers would need to do. They truly could be used at really any component during your math block. So you could use them as a warm-up or an activator if you're using the guided math model. It builds a classroom culture of mathematicians and mathematical thinking. You can also use it during journaling. So if you have a puzzle talk or you're facilitating a puzzle talk, have them journal down either in their notebooks, or if you're using some of the organizers from ST Math, those are great to really kind of get not only them to talk about their thinking in math, but also to get that down on paper. It can also be the focus of a mini lesson. So a lot of times when I was in the classroom, I would use ST Math or an objective to teach my mini lesson to really hone in on a skill, especially when we're talking about the CRA approach. You could use it as a morning message. So put up a puzzle and have students kind of collaborate and talk about different ways they think that they would be able to solve it. And then your morning circle could be about trying some of those different strategies. You could also have a question of the day, open-ended problem solving, or you could even use it as a small group intervention, especially when you're really trying to hone in the kind of basis of a skill, especially when we're looking at the visual representational aspect of a concept. So a great way to use puzzle talks is to launch whole group ST Math. So we saw on the Jamboard that a lot of people are noticing that it is being used as a whole group time. So this is a way that students can kind of already start thinking about ST Math and thinking about what GG needs to do. So how do you choose a puzzle? And there's a couple of different ways that you could choose a puzzle. Generally, when I'm working with teachers, there's kind of 3 different strategies that I usually kind of try to hone in on. So if you're looking at your class data or that class dashboard that I had shared previously, identify a puzzle that a lot of students are stuck on. So you can sort by who's on what objective, and you can notice, wow, there's 7 or 8 kids that are all on this puzzle. I'm going to do a puzzle talk on that, so that way when they go to do their ST Math in our whole group time, or if you're using it as a rotation or a center activity, they have an entry point. They have a spot where they, okay, I did this and I saw my teacher use these strategies, or I had classmates that use these strategies, but now I can come and apply it to the level that I'm on. You can also find a puzzle that's aligned to the standards that you're teaching. So if you're along your scope and sequence of your math curriculum and you're working on area, you can find and use the objective on area in ST Math to really hone in on those concepts. And I use area because that is so visual and representational that ST Math is a great way for students to recognize the underlying concepts around area. And it's really important that when you're done with a puzzle talk, that students have the opportunity to then go do ST Math and go solve puzzles. It's one of those things where they're so excited and they're really invested in GG and they have this great understanding, and we're either modeling a puzzle that a lot of students are stuck on, or we're modeling a puzzle that we're already honing in on in our math block, that they need the opportunity to then go practice what they had learned. So we are going to have you fill out a Jamboard. So based on this data set, and I'm going to keep it up here, the Jamboard link, it was in the chat. We can post it back in for you so you don't have to scroll back up. And if you could add on to the Jamboard which puzzle you would choose based on this data set and why.
you probably can't see the data.
Oh, good point.
All right, so for the sake of time, we're just going to look at. All right, so we don't have a ton of people responding on the puzzle talk, and that's okay. But realistically, right, like when we look at this, we're trying to choose a puzzle talk that's going to, right, have the biggest impact for kids. So like Allison said, we might choose one that kids have a lot of alerts or tries on. You might choose it based on who's the most kids are on what puzzle, and it can start there. That way, when you start to go through that problem solving process while you do a puzzle talk to engage those kids in that math discourse and math talk, that they really are starting to understand the strategies and have ideas of what they can do when they solve.
All right, so like we had mentioned earlier, this whole presentation is really about applying skills and strategies that teachers are already using in their classroom. And one that has been talked about for a very long time is number talks. And when we think of puzzle talks, we're really just thinking of a number talk while using ST Math to facilitate it. So we're recording students thinking up on the board, or if you wanted to annotate on with your mouse, if you are teaching remotely, we're relating concepts from grade level standards or concepts to the puzzle talk that we've talked about previously, and we're making connections between the visual spatial concepts and the standard being taught through the puzzle. So if we're talking about volume, we're watching the layers be filled by Gigi as Gigi is moving across the screen. So we're really helping students make those connections between the content that we're teaching and how it's being applied with ST Math and Gigi and the puzzles that he needs to solve. And during a puzzle talk, what should the teacher be doing? So if you're facilitating one-on-one with a student during the whole group time on a hurdle, you might be observing students as they're solving. And while students are doing whole group ST Math, that's a great opportunity for the teacher to walk around and notice, okay, I'm really noticing a lot of students are really stuck on this puzzle. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a puzzle talk on this. Or I might wrap up with a puzzle talk on this so that students can have an opportunity to play later on. And you're also identifying strategies that students are using to solve. Who's using tools? Who's using journaling pages? If ST Math is open, that means you either have a notebook or a whiteboard out, because we need to record our thinking. We really need to be brainstorming. Or during this time, you might also be facilitating a small group of students who are stuck on a similar hurdle. You might be guiding through the students through the problem solving process, or using the facilitating questions, which are both linked right here into the presentation, which we will share. So in summary, we really are looking for students to have cooperative learning opportunities to be able to share their mathematical discourse with their peers, but also with their teachers, so that teachers and students have an understanding of kind of where their thinking is at, what strategies they're using. And opportunities are everything, giving our students as many opportunities as we can to engage in discourse around math and really stretch and make their thinking visible. We really are looking to incorporate instructional strategies already being used. This is not one more thing that we have to reinvent the wheel. We're already using sentence stems. We all already have word walls and word banks, and we're using flexible groupings. All of that can be applied right into ST Math and really make our math block the most meaningful it can be. And we're really hoping to use puzzle talks to promote connections between grade level content and the visual representational strategies.
And even with puzzle talks, like we talk about it, teachers get nervous, like, oh, I'm new, I'm a novice to this, but really it's the same as math talks, which is if you use the math workshop model, it's something teachers probably have had PD in and lots of experience with, except instead of doing it on a math problem, it's going to be on an ST Math puzzle.
So we did recognize some of the questions that were in the app before the presentation started. So we did add these in. So what suggestions you have built to build discourse. Again, like we had talked about the sentence stems and building in opportunities for either one-on-one facilitation, small groups, puzzle talks. Those are all really great strategies. Maria also talked about the depth of knowledge, Webb's depth of knowledge in order to differentiate discourse among grade levels. And then I also talked a little bit at the beginning around kind of the language complexity across grade levels, but also language proficiency levels when we're talking about ELs. And then support for new teachers and kind of where to start. So one thing, especially this is important for puzzle talks, if we're going to build capacity for teachers to be doing puzzle talks and incorporating it into their math block, if we can, one thing that we have seen to be really successful is to create lab teachers at the grade level, or even within your school if you don't necessarily have enough teachers at each grade level. And what a lab teacher would do is they're really looking to present their practice. They have this strategy that they have been implementing and it's working really well, and they're willing to have teachers go in and observe them. And that might look a little bit different depending on whether it's a veteran teacher or a new teacher. But if you have a teacher in your building that has done puzzle talks and they're incorporating them, have a new teacher or even a teacher that is a veteran that's looking to implement puzzle talks into their classroom, have them go in and observe. Observing is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do. Or if you have instructional coaches, which some districts have, but some don't, your instructional coaches can go in and model puzzle talks and build the capacity for lab teachers. And then that way you can have it see it be done at different grade levels. And then you're really building the capacity for teachers to start implementing this with fidelity a couple of days a week. So those are some questions that we had seen previously, but if anyone has any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them now.
I'm going to just tag team what Allison said too. Sometimes teachers are nervous to present their practice because they think, oh, this has to be perfect or I have to be an expert. You could also ask teachers, like if you do have a team of teachers that works together or in grade spans, plan one lesson together, have them work together to plan out your script for your puzzle talk, they'll pick the learning objective, what you think the misconceptions might be, what you're going to highlight and make connections to. And then one teacher can volunteer to actually model the lesson that everyone planned together. And then you can come back together as a group to be like, what worked, what didn't, did we expect kids to answer this way, or were we expecting something different? Were we able to make the connections we wanted? How much time did it take us? So you don't have to be an expert. And again, it's about using the strategies you already use. So me and Allison presented a few that we thought were really common and people would be able to connect to, but it's about figuring out how can you already use those routines that your teachers already do, you're familiar with. So it's not that one more thing, it's just using those best practices for building discourse and facilitating discussion and bringing them, incorporating them more into ST Math.
We do have a couple more minutes for questions. If the attendees want to write anything in the chat or unmute and ask Allison and Maria something in these last couple of minutes. But I just want to personally say thank you so much, Allison and Maria. This was fantastic, super informative. I know I'm leaving with some great ideas. So I really appreciate this presentation. Thank you to the attendees who were here with us. And like Allison mentioned, the presentation will be shared out. And yeah, we hope you could take a look at the slide decks and continue on with this awesome work and directives. So I think we have
extremely much. So when I tell you heart is overjoyed. It's a lot to take in so much time, but I do want to say thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm going to put the link to the presentation in the chat. It is a Google Deck, so hopefully that will work for you. It is a view only, but you should be able to view it with no problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing that. Thanks for everybody for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of the user conference. The next breakout sessions start in 5 or 6 minutes, and then the keynote is a little bit after that. So have a wonderful Tuesday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, everyone.